All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening if you're watching this in the future. Welcome to the monthly Night Skies live from the Bell Museum. My name is Thaddeus. I'm one of our planetarium educators here at the Bell, working in the Whitney and Elizabeth Macmillan Planetarium. And I'm happy to join you once again in sharing our night sky. Or, of course, as we are often doing these days, fighting with Zoom in order to show you the night sky. But I work here in the planetarium, and I've got up a program called Stellarium that will show the night sky to y'all through Facebook here. This is a program that you can actually download and use yourselves. Stellarium, Stellarium, is available for free online and is also available as an app for various platforms. All right, and let's jump right into things. We're here right now near the end of August, but I'll be talking about the end of July, but I'll be talking about our August night skies, showing you some cool things you can see in the upcoming month. But I am starting at the end of August because there's something very cool you can see in just the next few days and throughout the year. If you happen to head out on July 29th, that would be this Friday, if I've got my dates right, and you're looking at about 10:30 in the western sky, you might see something pretty cool appear. You've got a lot of stars here we're seeing in Stellarium, but you'll see a new bright light appear in the sky, and it'll move across the sky pretty quickly. You'll definitely notice that movement. In fact, over just a few minutes, it'll move from the western part of the sky, that bright light, all the way to the southern part of the sky. Now, that would be the bright light marked out here in Stellarium, which is the ISS, the International Space Station. We have a really great pass overhead this Friday. It's about 4 minutes or so going above our heads from west to south. It'll be very easy to spot. It may not look as bright as it does in the night sky, as it does here in Stellarium, but it will still be a very significant point of light. It'll be brighter than the stars you see around it, and again, moving very quickly. It also won't be blinking. It'll be a solid point of light. So that'll be a good clue that it's the ISS and not, a plane. If you want to see more passes of the ISS, especially as we head into August, my colleague behind the scenes, Emily, will be putting a link in the chat there to check to spot the station. So you can put in your own location anywhere on Earth and see upcoming passes for about the next about week or so, usually at the most. The orbit of the ISS does change a little bit over time, so the passes are accurate for a few days into the future. And my colleague behind the scenes, Emily, will also be taking your questions. So if you've got questions that you want to see about the night sky, whether you're watching this live now or you're watching in the future, please put those questions in the chat. And today we'll answer them as soon as we can right away. It may take a few days for us to get back to you if you're watching this in the future and you post a question there. But Emily will take care of that. Thank you, Emily. And she'll also be posting more links as we go along because we are exploring the night sky here, but we also have star maps available from the Bell Museum where you can explore the night sky yourself. All righty. Coming up in July, though, let's jump into things here. In fact, jumping right to August 1st. And not just the evening, but our morning sky. Going to jump to, not quite that late, going to jump to early morning at about 4:30 here. If you are getting up early in the morning, if you're one of those people, you have a great view of the morning sky. Hopefully it's clear, but especially on the first and throughout the first week of August, you can see 4 planets lined up all the way across the night sky. In fact, I'm not even sure I can zoom out enough here to show all of them. Looking here, we have Jupiter right to the southeast. We have Saturn far over to the southwest, Mars back over to the southeast there, and then way over to the northeast, low to the horizon, is Venus, our brightest planet. Now, these planets will be in this long line across the sky, and you will see a lot of stars around them. Even at 4:30, we've got some bright stars there in the morning sky. But just like the ISS, telling the difference between planets and stars is pretty easy because the planets won't twinkle. So they also won't, they'll look a little bit more like the ISS in that they're very bright and not twinkling. They will be stationary though. The stars behind it will be a little fainter generally, and they will be twinkling, just like the song says. Now, if you happen to have binoculars or telescope, you can also take a gander at these planets. Venus is a good one to start with because it's very bright and very easy to find. You may not see a lot of detail on it, though. In fact, with a telescope, you can start to pick out some of the phases of Venus, the areas where it's a little brighter and then just a tiny bit darker. But overall, Venus is our brightest planet and is usually just a very bright ball there in the sky. Images like we see here through Stellarium are images taken from either telescopes like the Hubble Space Telescope or spacecraft that have actually flown past or to Venus, like the Magellan spacecraft, which orbited around Venus for years. This is also true for Mars as well. If we make our way over here to the southeast, Mars, much higher up in the sky, and with that, of course, very red-orange glow to it. It is our red neighbor there. Mars is great to see with a telescope, although again, it may just look like a red ball there in the sky. If you spend enough time looking at it, and you've got a lot of time, it'll be in our sky for months here, in the morning and going into the evening sky. Mars does have two little moons, Phobos and Deimos. So very experienced sky watchers, very dedicated sky watchers might be able to spot those. I'll say personally, I have not been able to see it, although it's on my bucket list here of things to observe in the night sky. Now, nearby Mars, at least in our sky, we do have another planet. You will need a telescope to see this one. This is the planet Uranus. With a telescope, it'll be a little bright blue marble there, bright blue ball in the sky. It's very beautiful to see. Always a cool object to see. The first of our ice giant planets, about 6 times the size of the Earth, with dozens of moons surrounding it. We see them marked out here from Titania to Oberon. And more. So take a look for that above Mars. It'll be easy to find in that way because it is right above Mars. But again, you'll need a telescope to see it. Going back to our big planets, though, we have the biggest planet in the solar system, Jupiter, visible in the morning sky throughout August and into the early evening as we head towards the end of the month. Jupiter, a magnificent sight. Might be a little bit more difficult to spot than Venus, not quite as bright, but still pretty easy to find. A pair of binoculars will bring it out in the night sky as a round, bright dot circle. Small telescope, few inches across, will show you a view, in fact, quite a bit like this, especially Jupiter itself and its moons surrounding it. This is one of the great things to look for with Jupiter, the 4 Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, which we see on the morning of August 1st will actually be lined up in that order. It won't always look like that. As we go forward through the days, in fact, just a day later, we find that Jupiter is now has 2 moons on both sides of it, Europa and Callisto on one side, Ganymede and Io on the other. So these moons do change over days, in fact, over just hours. If you do get a chance to watch Jupiter through the night, you'll see the moons in different positions. All right, and finally, last but not least, by any means, this is the best planet in the solar system, Saturn, visible to the southwest there, our magnificent ringed giant planet with its retinue of moons here, the most moons we know of in the solar system, orbiting around this planet with 82 of them, only 79 in Jupiter, so Saturn wins by just a couple there, just a few. It is, again, a beautiful sight with especially just a small telescope. Its little ring system, it will look like a little ring system, will come into view along with a few bright moons. Larger telescope, getting to 8 inches or so and larger, will show a very clear, distinct ring system around this gas giant planet, and you might start to get an appreciation of its size. The rings here are about 22 times the size of the Earth. So if you can imagine 22 Earths marching from one side of the rings to the other. That is how big they are. Saturn alone taking up about 9 of those Earths just by itself. All right. And keep an eye out, especially if you're looking with a small telescope, for the moon Titan over here, one of the more dynamic and interesting moons in our solar system. It in some way resembles Venus when we've observed it. It has a very thick, cloudy atmosphere. Unlike Venus, which is a very hot planet, the hottest planet we have, Titan is very cold, negative 300 degrees or so. And that means that its atmosphere here doesn't trap a lot of heat, but it does still have liquid on its surface. At these incredibly cold temperatures, the surface of Titan is covered with lakes and seas and rivers of liquid methane and liquid ethane. A fascinating world, one we will be exploring more in the next few decades with the Dragonfly mission set to launch sometime here in the next few years to reach Saturn in about 6 or so years after it launches. All right, now the planets are visible in the morning sky, but all of these planets are visible in the morning sky. But if you aren't one of those early risers, if you like to stay up late, there are some great sights to see, especially when it comes to Saturn. In fact, looking on August 11th, right around 9:30, there's going to be a very cool sight to see. I'm looking forward to seeing this personally here. Saturn will be rising at the same time as the full moon. So if we set the time here on Stellarium to August 11th, again, about 9:30, and then I'll get time moving forward as well. Saturn comes above the horizon to the southeast with the moon right below it, and it will be there with the moon as it moves all the way across the night sky throughout the night. So it'll be a great time to see both of these objects. You might not see as much detail on either of them because they will be so bright and so close to each other, but still a very cool sight just to witness as it moves across the sky. But these objects, Saturn and the moon, do move across the sky at different speeds. Saturn is orbiting around the sun, whereas the moon is orbiting around us. So every time we see the moon, it's in a different position. Every night we see the moon, it's in a very different position. And in fact, looking forward just a few days back at about 9:30 or so, on the 15th, or maybe about 22:30. Oh, we'll go all the way to 11:30 here. The moon and Jupiter will be rising at the same time. So if you do want to catch a glimpse of this, another cool sight, seeing our other gas giant planet nearby the moon, at least from our perspective. The moon at a very different phase here, going from the full moon to the waning gibbous moon. So still very bright, but one of the better times, in my opinion, to look at the moon. You still might need a small, some sort of light reduction filter on binoculars or a telescope to see it, but it'll be a very great sight to see with those beautiful maria, those dark seas on the surface of the moon, as well as the brighter highlands. There's also, at least here, especially here in Stellarium, there's a beautiful view of Tycho crater down near the southern pole of the moon, that magnificent rayed crater, those lines stretching out from that impact, where debris was thrown outwards. Always a cool sight. I love seeing Tycho crater personally there on the moon. All right. Now, both Jupiter and Saturn are visible almost throughout the entire night. Saturn, though, in particular, does reach opposition on the night of the 14th. So that means it will be visible from sunrise, or from sunset all the way into sunrise. It's at its closest approach to the Earth, less than 1 billion miles away from it, or away from the Earth. So just a tiny bit bigger and brighter, as seen through a particular telescope and as tracked by very dedicated astrophotographers. All right, right around also this same time period is the Perseids meteor shower. But I'm actually going to say that the Perseids is you probably don't want to look for the Perseids around this time of the month, around mid-August, because the Perseids, one of our annual meteor showers. This is when bits of rock and dust left behind by a comet, Swift-Tuttle, if I remember correctly. This debris comes into our atmosphere and it heats up the air, and it leaves those bright glowing streaks, shooting stars, as we call them, right? But the very bright full moon will interfere with that. So if you are looking to really see the Perseids, I'd head out later, in fact, almost near the very end of the month, in the early evening, just a few hours after it gets dark. The moon won't be up yet. You'll have these beautiful dark skies, and you can look for these shooting stars. Now, to see them, you're going to want to face a particular direction in the night sky, and that's going to be actually generally to the east, to the west. You're going to want to face to the west. That's because the Perseids meteor shower, all those meteors will appear to come from the constellation of Perseus, which is visible over to the east. So what we call the radiant of the Perseids meteor shower, see if I can find it here, that is visible over here near the constellation of Perseus, actually a little bit more over here to the northeast. All right, and it looks like the parent body of Perseids is indeed Comet Swift-Tuttle. Look at me. Now, Perseus is a pretty easy constellation to find. However, it's usually just a few bright stars, Camelopardalis, excuse me, Over here, it's just a few bright stars. It kind of looks like a tree branch to me personally in the night sky. And to track it down, it can help to look for another constellation above it in the night sky, one that's very familiar to many, many people. Looking here to the northeast, we can find the constellation of Cassiopeia, which is just this very simple W, or an M if you tilt your head the other way. The Queen Cassiopeia there in the night sky, very distinctive, very, very easy to spot. And again, right below it, the constellation of Perseus. And again, nearby it, the radiant, the point where the Perseids appear to come from. So by facing away from that point, so instead of facing to the northeast, you face to the west, those meteors will be streaking above your head, entering the atmosphere, and they'll be a great sight to see. Again, near the end of the month when the full moon isn't interfering with the show. Also near the end of the month, since we're here near to the morning, in fact, right here on coming to August 30th or so, there's another sight to see in terms of things nearby each other. Moon and Saturn, Moon and Jupiter, now Mars, and two star clusters, one of which I think many of you watching might be very familiar with. So looking sometime between midnight and sunrise around August 30th, a few days before and after is fine, you can find the bright red star Aldebaran. Now Aldebaran is the eye of Taurus, the bull. And it will look a little bit like Mars, the red planet right nearby it. However, again, Mars will be twinkling in the night sky, whereas, Aldebaran will be twinkling in the night sky, whereas Mars will be that steady point of light. So Aldebaran here, Mars right above it, and then coming up from that, the deep sky object known as M45 or the Pleiades. Trying to bring up just the Pleiades here. Here are the Pleiades. Mars will be in between Aldebaran and the Pleiades, but as I mentioned, two star clusters. The head of Taurus here, the V that we see is part of the cluster known as the Hyades star cluster, the closest large open cluster of stars to the Earth. So that'll be a very cool sight to see, something great to look for, personally, I think great to look for with binoculars. Pair of sort of backyard bird watching binoculars around 8x42s or so, something around that size will give a great view of just what we see here in Stellarium right now. Now, what you're looking at are two very different types of star clusters. Similar and also very different types of star clusters. The Pleiades star cluster and the Hyades star cluster are both open clusters. They're very young stars, born relatively recently. In the case of the Pleiades, we're looking at something that's stars that were born about 65 to 75 million years ago. And so it's a pretty tight cluster of stars, generally speaking, covering maybe about a few dozen light years just in diameter here. With the brightest ones we see, the Seven Sisters themselves, marked out or seen very clearly here as these big, bright blue-white stars. But then hundreds of other stars make up this cluster as well. We see them scattered in the background or with the cluster itself. The Hyades, though, bring it up here, it's just this very large area in the night sky. This cluster is much older, about 600 million years old. So the stars have scattered now across dozens and dozens and dozens of light years. And in just a few 100 million years more, pretty much this entire cluster will be dispersed. So we won't see any sort of grouping there. Although many of the stars will remain together as binary star systems, which is a very common sight in the night sky, two stars close together orbiting around each other. And in fact, two stars close by each other could be orbiting around each other as a binary star system, or just as commonly, if not more commonly, we also see a lot of double star systems. Stars that look like one in the night sky, but when we look at them more closely, we find out that there's multiples of them. One of the most famous of these double stars is visible back to the south and is visible in the earlier evening. So I'm going to jump to 10 o'clock here, and we'll just stick with mid-month as well. So about looking August 15th here at about 10 o'clock. And we're looking to the south. Now, there's a lot of different ways to find your directions in the night sky. I won't go too much into detail on that today, but the quick and easy way is find the Big Dipper, which points to the north, the Polaris, the North Star, and put that to your back. Or, of course, these days you can also use an app on your phone, whatever works for you. But looking to the southern sky, there are a lot of bright stars, especially because we're seeing the Milky Way here. But there are three in particular that really stand out. One high above to the southeast is the star Vega, part of the constellation of Lyra, or the Harp. Coming down from Vega at a bit of a diagonal to the south and the horizon is the star Altair, part of Aquila, or the Eagle. And coming up from both of these over for a little bit further to the east there, we find the star Deneb, which marks out the tail of Cygnus, the swan. Now, Cygnus here is by itself a very bright constellation. It's easy to look for and find in the night sky. It looks kind of like, actually to me, like a bow and arrow, but if you can just imagine those lines there, it also does really look like a bird. The head of the swan is the star Albireo, which to our eyes looks like one star, but is in fact one of these double star systems, which Stellarium doesn't want to, kind of wants to show us today. It doesn't really want to show us today. It is a double star system. So looking with a pair of binoculars, again, those backyard binoculars or a telescope, you'll see that one star turn into two. And this is a particularly nice one to look for. Albireo is a really bright, beautiful red and blue star in the night sky, or sort of goldish yellow and bluish, depending sort of on how you see it and how your eyes are. And it's just a magnificent sight to look for in the night sky. And really along this entire part of the night sky, again, looking to the south, southeast, where we find the Milky Way, there's a lot of very cool objects to look for. Over here in Vega, or excuse me, in Lyra, the Harp, with the bright star Vega, right at the end, or right in between the last two stars, we find the Ring Nebula, a really magnificent planetary nebula. You do need a telescope to see this one. It will not look quite like this. It will look, though, quite distinctly like a ring there in the night sky, probably a little bit more grayish and fuzzy. Imagine the ghost of a Cheerio floating there in space. The Ring Nebula is a dead star. So you're seeing here a star that used to be once like our sun, but is now expanded outwards, and its outer atmosphere is puffed off into space, and it has very gently died and is starting to fully dissipate. This is one of the closer planetary nebulas, about 3-ish thousand light years away, and a great object to start with if you get into viewing these fainter deep sky objects. But one of the great things to view in the night sky, in the summer sky, in August especially, are some of the brighter fuzzy objects, especially the globular clusters that we can see in the night sky. And I'm going to see if I can bring up just the globulars here. There's a lot of objects in the night sky, so take a second here. Globular clusters are collections of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of very old stars. So unlike those open clusters like the Hyades or Pleiades that we saw near Mars, open globular clusters are incredibly old, billions and billions of years old. And there's a few that are really great to start with. Nearby Vega and Lyra, we find the constellation of Hercules, marked out by a pretty simple, or easy to find, by finding this very simple square we call the keystone of Hercules. This grouping of stars right here also marks out where M13, or the great star cluster in Hercules, is. So on the more western side of the of Hercules here, right in between those two stars, as we see it at least, we can find this magnificent globular cluster. One of my absolute favorites in the night sky. Contains about 300,000 stars here that are 11 to 12 billion years old, so very, very old, and about 25,000 light years away. Very beautiful cluster, globular cluster of stars. Through binoculars, it will look, in fact, personally, I can say this, personally speaking, it will look a little bit more like this, so a little fuzzy blob there. With a telescope, and of course that will depend on your binoculars as well, of course. But with a telescope, and depending on your telescope, you can get a view starting to look more like this, kind of like a cotton ball of stars there in the sky. And with globulars, it can be all about trying to see just the different concentrations of stars. Some of these have a much denser core. Some globulars are more spread out. Even they do disperse a little bit over time. M13 is a great one to start with. Other ones as well and are visible, like M10. This is in the constellation of Ophiuchus. which coming down from Hercules, you can find kind of looking like a sort of stretched out house here, like a very tall house. However you want to see Ophiuchus, he is officially known as the serpent bearer because he is usually connected with these two constellations of serpents on either side of him. But M10, again, a great object to view in the night sky, can be seen again with binoculars. In fact, the nice thing about M10 is you can also capture nearby it M12, which is called the Gumball cluster here in Stellarium. I haven't heard that one name before, but they're both visible near, relatively speaking, nearby each other. In a way, they are nearby each other. They're all still part of our Milky Way galaxy, orbiting around the galaxy, though outside it at these tens of thousands of light years away from us. In this case, about 15,000 light years. So M10 and M12, they're relatively speaking nearby each other. Another two more that are great to look for. And then finally, there's a lot of them here, but I'll leave just one more. Coming down further to the south is the constellation of Sagittarius, which if you're looking for is pretty easy to find because there's 4 stars on one side, sort of 3 more on the top and 3 more on the right. And that gets you the main grouping known as the teapot, the handle, the lid, and the spout. But that is officially Sagittarius, the archer or the centaur there in the sky. And right near the top of the teapot, there's a lot of them, but off the top star here, Cos Borealis, we find the great Sagittarius cluster, or M22, Messier 22 might be an easier way to look that one up. Another beautiful globular cluster, nice dense concentration, might look a little bit like M13 if you're seeing it. So take a look and compare the similarities between this one and other ones and the differences. Now, there are a lot of globulars. There's about 100 or so that we've tracked going around the Milky Way. So there's a lot more that you can just see here, going M80 over there and M4 in particular near Antares in Scorpius, looking further over to the southeast, M2 over here and M30 down there are 2 more bright ones. But I believe I said I promised I wasn't going to talk more about them. So I will leave it to you to track down these globular clusters while we track down a few different deep sky objects. We'll bring them all back here. Or actually, I'm going to just bring up one more set of objects or different set of objects. We can see marked out here, by the way, came up as I was clicking around. We find Capricornus and Aquarius. That would be the mere goat over there of Capricornus. And then Aquarius is the guy pouring water into the sky. Also nearby this, in fact, I'll just point out one of my favorite constellations. Up from Aquarius or over from Altair there in Aquila the Eagle is the small but pretty distinctive constellation of Delphinus, or the dolphin. This is a very simple, very small constellation, really just a diamond with a line coming off it, but one of the easier ones, I think, to imagine as a dolphin, especially if you connect that bright star up there, because you get the fin there on the top of the dolphin. Small constellation, nothing particularly special about it. It's been recorded for thousands of years. One of the first ones we have from Ptolemy, and just a nice one to look for. And you know, I like dolphins, so I like looking for that one in the night sky. All right, looking around here though, I want to bring us back to Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia is kind of low in the sky in the early evening. We'll get higher and higher as we go throughout August and into the fall. And Cassiopeia over here, this W of stars to the northeast, this will also show us how to find M31, the Andromeda Galaxy. You can take the 2 stars, or the 3 stars of Cassiopeia that make up one side of the triangle, and coming from the top of that triangle, it points you pretty much directly to M13. You can also use the constellation it's named after of Cassiopeia, which is usually just a few bright stars connected together. And in this way, we see as we come down from 1, 2, 3, we see 3 more stars that also point us right to M31. So the Andromeda Galaxy, our closest, the closest galaxy to the Earth, a large spiral galaxy, very similar to the Milky Way itself, the galaxy that we're right in. M31 is a beautiful sight to see. And again, a great object for just binoculars. Those back air binoculars. You've been out doing some bird watching this summer. well, go out in the night sky and look for M31. It'll look like a bright, fuzzy football there in the sky. Speaking from what I've seen, at least of it in our night sky. And looking around here and looking at my notes and also looking at our time here, there's a lot more in the night sky. I point out some of the major groupings of stars from the Summer Triangle, Cassiopeia. Oh, there's Pegasus, which I didn't point out, but coming over here, the Teapot, Sagittarius, Ophiuchus, good old Hercules up there. There's a lot more in the night sky, but I want to pause and make sure I see if Emily behind the scene has gotten any questions for me to answer, anything we're wondering about there about our night sky.
No questions today.
All right. Well, in that case, I see we're almost at the end of time, but I will bring up, do one final thing and actually show you how to find north for those who might be wondering about finding your sense of direction. If you don't have those helpful red letters in the sky, really just look around and look for either Cassiopeia or especially the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper we see marked out over here to the northwest, kind of low in the sky, almost pointing at an angle down towards the horizon. The last two stars of the bucket of the Big Dipper, these two stars here, Merak and Dubhe, they will point you, if you imagine a line between them extending outwards, they will point you to this star over here, known as Polaris, our North Star. And that is the star that is almost directly above the North Pole of the Earth. So as the night goes along, as all these stars spin above us or appear to spin as the Earth rotates, Polaris will always stay in one place. So that shows you where north is, and from there you can find all your other major cardinal directions. Cassiopeia also does something of the same. The three stars on the long side of Cassiopeia, imagining a line down between them and then a right angle over, will also guide you to Polaris. Maybe not quite as easy as the Big Dipper, but will also get you at least in the right general area. And from there, there's so much more to see and to find, from galaxies near Ursa Major to open star clusters all throughout the Milky Way, as well as those magnificent globular clusters. And with a telescope, beautiful nebulas as well, where you can see new stars forming. Now, these are all things in our night sky, but if you do want to see a little bit more of our Earth, I'll also recommend that you come right here to the Bell Museum, because for the next few weeks, we have the very, very cool Gaia installation, where we have a massive Earth hanging in our entranceway and entryway, our Horizon Hall at the museum. It's very cool to see. So if you get a chance, come by the Bell Museum to view that. Only for a few weeks here. We'll put some more details in the chat about that. We're doing some late night events as well, doing some stargazing, in fact, here at the Bell Museum on one of those late night days. So keep an eye on the website for the links we're going to post here to see more of the night sky. And with that, I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you are all staying safe and have a great rest of your day.